Well, greetings, everyone. Buster Wilson here, and I wanted to express my thoughts on the new decision by the Supreme Court. I don't know. Let's see. Check the sound here. We're doing this live, so we want to make sure we're doing everything like we can. All right. I hope that's good enough for everyone. Um, I wanted to express my opinion about it, and here's why. I want to say right off the bat, there just doesn't need to be any um, accusations that I hate gay people. Not any accusations, please, that I want anybody to be discriminated against, because both of those statements are absolutely not true. They're intellectually dishonest and they're an outright lie if you say them about me or about what I'm about to say. I don't hate gay people. I don't. However, this particular decision that the Supreme Court has made is going to affect churches. And I pastor a church, and so it's important to me. So allow me, not only that, what was done in this decision was an approach by the Supreme Court that I think violates our American system. So I'm going at it, first of all, honestly, from a completely patriotic, looking at the American system approach, and then the effect of that improper approach by the court and what effect it's going to have on the church. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I know I don't hate gay people. I don't want any gay people to be discriminated against, not truly discriminated. So here's my thoughts. I've got them written down over here. If you will allow me the privilege to look in this direction, I could not get my notes. Kind of new at this live Facebook thing, but let me share it with you, and then I have this written down, and I probably will stop and make some commentary along the way. Okay, here's my commentary on the new sexual discrimination decision by SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, that matters a lot. The judges basically said that the 1964 Title VII law, barring discrimination based on sex, that's not the only reason the law bars discrimination, but it was the one chosen in this case, should now cover discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. But the law as written by Congress never addresses those issues. When written in 1964, orientation was still an accepted taboo, and gender identity issues were still classified literally by the psychological professionals of the country as a mental illness. So what the court has done was to reinterpret and thus rewrite the law of 1964. But that is not the function of the Supremes. They can only interpret law. But again, what they have done in this case is what they did during the Obama years, I believe, with the gay marriage issue. They have rewritten law, and they've rewritten it to agree with the left's side of the argument. Now, only Congress can do that, and that's my point. Only Congress can do that. Why? Because that's the way the country was set up. Only Congress can write or rewrite or do away with laws. And the reason for that, Congress, unlike justices of the Supreme Court, are accountable to the people, who are the true arbiters of how this country is run. So the right to make law, or to make law say what they want it to say, was reserved for the lawmakers, who are accountable to the people at the ballot box every 2 and 6 years. But the Supreme Court justices have, as they did with the marriage decision, rewritten what the 1964 Title VII law actually says. In fact, there's an article that I got on my Facebook page right now. The article that I'm sharing on my Facebook page actually makes the point that the lawmakers have tried several times. The lawmakers, Congress, has tried several times to actually rewrite Title VII, to actually include sexual orientation and identity, sexual identity issues, but have never been able to do so. Not my words, theirs. Why? I believe it's because they knew, the voters, the American people, the power of the American system is in the hands of the people, and it's because of their vote. They believe the American people would never go along with it. So in the way that law is supposed to be made, it never could be done, or at least has not ever been able to be done. Now, what this court has done is made law that the elected officials who are accountable to the people could never get done. This is referred to by most as court activism, judicial activism. This is further proof also that this current Supreme Court is highly politicized. This is so wrong. Again, sexual orientation and gender identity were not issues. They were not considerations. They were not even in the mind of the lawmakers who wrote the Title VII law of 1964. So, when the justices say that they are simply interpreting what the law means when it says no discrimination based on sex, they simply cannot be doing so because there is no way that the original writers of that law had that in mind in 1964. It's absolutely imperative and of immeasurable importance that we keep the functions of the court, which is to interpret the law, and the functions of the lawmakers, which is to actually make the law, separate. Yet this decision, along with the decision of the Supreme Court on gay marriage, and by the way, I personally believe the 1963 decision regarding abortion rights, are cases where the court stepped into the role of the lawmaker. They have in all three instances rewritten law that now cannot be challenged by the voters, the real power of the American system. Do I want anyone to be discriminated against, as I've said already? No, of course not. But to force, now under the weight of this law, businesses and Christian schools and Christian churches and organizations to make hiring decisions based on these two issues is simply wrong. Why is it wrong? Well, the first reason is because we have First Amendment protections. The very First Amendment gives churches protection to worship without restriction by the federal government. But the other thing is, the old saying in America is that your rights begin, or rather your rights end where my rights began. The door opened by this decision is so outrageous that the implications are simply unimaginable. May I give you an example? And let me be honest, it's an extreme example. But the point is, even this extreme example would, and most likely would, be protected under this law. Suppose a man who likes to dress up as a woman, maybe because he believes that he's a woman, his gender identity, and suppose he would dress, as some would say, flamboyantly, as frankly many transgenders and sexual identity issued people do. Maybe he dresses like a drag queen. But let's just say this man still also likes to keep a beard. So he's dressed as a woman, dressed flamboyantly as a drag queen, but still clearly identified as a man. Say he comes in and applies for the job as the secretary of your Christian school or your church. What if then you choose not to hire this person because their presentation not only goes against, say, what you might believe the Bible teaches as a Christian church, but also, according to the community standards in which the church exists in, would be blatantly inappropriate as the first impression presentation of the church or school. Well, this person would soon own your church or your school because of the lawsuit that this new Title VII interpretation would bring about. Now, if you think my choice of individual description of the job applicant was a little bit too far out or exaggerated, I use it because in reality, that kind of situation is exactly what this new decision could and would protect. I do not hate people of the LGBTQ community or people with gender identity orientation issues. I do not. Again, to accuse me or this presentation of hatred would be intellectually dishonest and just a blatant lie. But I also love the church. I love the Word of God. And I love God's natural order of life. I will always stand with God's Word's description of God's attitude about these and all other issues as much as I possibly can. But that same word demands of me that I love everyone. In fact, I'm even commanded as a Christian to love even my enemies. So Jesus died for all mankind. Jesus died for everyone, period. He died for everyone. So I'm to love everyone, and I try as best I can to do so. But all of this doesn't mean that everyone's lifestyle is meant to be forced upon everyone else. And there are those who would equate, like the Supreme Court apparently did in this decision, that being gay is equal to being black, which was the original reason of protection for the tenets of the 1964 Title VII Civil Rights Act. Some would say being gay is the same as being black, so that's why it all applies. Well, for the sake of intellectual honesty and fairness, we must admit that there are many, even within the scientific field, that still believe that a black person cannot help being black, but that a queer person has, for whatever the reasons, chosen to be queer. One is born that way, the other is a choice. Now look, I know that to say what I've just said is seen as discriminatory and hateful today, but I beg to differ. Even to this day, there are no scientifically indisputable proofs that sexual orientation is anything more than a choice. Now, I understand. Listen to me, my friends. I understand that environment, culture, peer pressure, what you were raised in, all play a role in the lives of many of this sexual orientation to cause them to feel that they have no other choice than to make the LGBTQ choice. I understand that. I'm not saying that people don't feel that this is the way they were made. But feelings, even environmental and cultural impacts, still do not equate to being on the same level as a person being born black, or being born Caucasian, or being born Oriental. I just don't believe the science proves that. And there are good reasons why, for over 5,000 years, most of mankind had strong exceptions to these issues we're talking about today. But listen to me. I want to be clear about this. If you choose to be gay, that's your right. This is America. You choose to be gay, that's your right. And I personally have no desire or right to interfere with your choice of lifestyle. None at all. You are free to be whomever or whatever you choose to be. And I accept that. Now, I may see that part of my calling in life is to explain consequences of such choices, but that doesn't mean that I want to prevent you from it, or that it's that I hate you or think you should be discriminated against. I just don't. Again, to accuse me of such would be just outright lies. But taking those freedoms to live that way, if one chooses to do so, and then enforce upon all others by the heavy hand of unchallengeable law that the rest of us must accept those ways of life into addressable areas that affect the freedoms of our lives, that part is just plain wrong. And it's not what the writers of the Title VII law intended, or were they even thinking about in 1964. That's my main point. What the Supreme Court did was not interpret the law, they rewrote it. And that is not their constitutional right. If you want a law that includes sexual identity and sexual orientation, then elect lawmakers that will write such laws on your behalf. Let them then make a law that the court can then interpret for the rest of us to say what they meant for it to say, rather than the court taking a law from 1964 and then trying to tell all of us that it says something they never meant for it to say. Those are my thoughts. I appreciate the comments. I know that there will be many who will vehemently disagree with me. I only ask, can we not agree to disagree agreeably? I don't hate you, no matter what your position. I ask you not to hate me. Let's have a conversation. If we, if nothing else, let's talk about how our system of governance was designed to work. I think that'd be an interesting conversation to have. And that's what I'm trying to start to do here today. But I do ask the Christians who are watching this to pray for your churches, because one of the things that Justice Gorsuch said, in his opinion for the decision, was that cases involving Christian schools and churches were not covered by this decision, in that they would be forced by this decision to protect the hiring decisions of LGBTQ people. And what he's saying is there have to be new cases to come before the court now if churches don't want to do that. If churches don't want to be forced to hire people they feel are inappropriate for their setting, they're going to have to be new cases come before the court. So that absolutely means that we are headed toward multiple challenges as churches and Christian schools and organizations. So that's going to be tough. We need to pray for the churches. God bless you. Thanks for listening. I appreciate the hearing. Again, if you disagree, I hope you'll disagree agreeably. For I hate no one. Never have, never will. And just because we disagree doesn't mean we have to hate each other. God bless you, and thanks for listening.